In the summer of 1895, Indian Territory was chasing a name more than a man. Zip Wyatt was blamed for robberies he likely committed, and murders he may not have. Newspapers called him notorious, posses chased him across counties, and rumors filled in the gaps where facts ran thin. This is not a clean outlaw story. It's a story about how reputation, aliases, and fear could turn a fugitive into a symbol, and how in the fractured world of Indian Territory, truth often mattered less than having someone to hunt. This is the rise, flight, and end of Zip Wyatt, as close as a record will let us get. Well, let's get into it, shall we? My name's Steven, and welcome to Wild West Deep Dives. Nathaniel Ellsworth Wyatt was born in Indiana in 1864 to John T. and Rachel Quick Wyatt, the second of 8 children in a family that never found stability. 7 of the children were boys, raised in grinding poverty by parents who were nearly illiterate and constantly on the move. By 1889, the family had finally settled roughly 14 miles northeast of Guthrie, Oklahoma, during the Oklahoma Land Rush, but by then, the patterns were already set and disorder followed them. Wyatt's father, known locally as Old Six-Shooter Bill, was a familiar figure in Guthrie jail records, repeatedly arrested for drunkenness and disorderly conduct. His older brother, Six-Shooter Jack, made a living as a professional gambler and would be shot to death in a Texline, Texas saloon in 1891. And for all the Texans out there who love to tell me when I mispronounce towns, I think it would be hard to mispronounce that one. But I honestly wouldn't be surprised with some crazy pronunciation like Texalina. In all seriousness, I really do appreciate y'all helping me out with him. But violence and instability were not little happenings in Nathaniel Wyatt's upbringing. They were the environment. Sometime before his criminal career fully emerged, Nathaniel acquired the nickname Zip, reportedly from a man living near Fort Smith, Arkansas, and he would be known by that name for the rest of his life, along with the alias Dick Yeager, not to be confused with the Dick Yeager that was part of Quantrill's Raiders during the Civil War. His mother Rachel died in February of 1890, and within a year, Zip married Annie Bailey near Mulhall, Oklahoma. They had one daughter, but any chance at a settled life collapsed almost immediately. On the 3rd of June 1891, Zip Wyatt shot up the town of Mulhall, wounding 2 citizens before fleeing north into the Cherokee Outlet and eventually into Kansas. Whatever line separated hard living from the outlaw trail, Wyatt crossed it early, and he never stepped back. With the Mulhall shooting behind him and a warrant already hanging over his name, Zip Wyatt disappeared north into Kansas and immediately kept moving like a man who understood one truth about the frontier: speed mattered more than innocence. In Kiowa County, he turned to what he knew: theft and intimidation, lifting riding gear in Greensburg. Deputy Sheriff Andrew Balfour tracked him to Pryor's Grove, roughly 10 miles north of town, and tried to take him in. The arrest attempt detonated into gunfire. Wyatt shot Balfour in the abdomen, the bullet reportedly striking the spine. The deputy, mortally wounded, still managed to return fire, hitting Wyatt twice and only slightly injuring him in the left hand. Balfour died from his wounds, leaving behind a wife and 6 children, and Wyatt now carried a murder charge that made any future encounter with lawmen a life-or-death gamble. With a new warrant and a reward posted for his capture, reportedly $1,000, or about $35,600 today, Wyatt ran back to Indiana and hid among relatives, only to be caught after several months. Extradition dragged out, but eventually, he was returned to Guthrie to face charges stemming from the Mulhall spree. He escaped once, was recaptured, and then tried again on the 31st of December 1892, and this time, he got away for good. Not long after, Wyatt linked up with Ike Black, a former Kansas cattle thief who had already done time in the Kansas penitentiary and drifted south into Oklahoma. Together, they began operating as a small pair, and then as a small gang, hitting rural targets where law enforcement was thin and response time was slow. One of the robberies tied to them was the November 1893 holdup of the Hightower Store and Post Office in Arapahoe, and accounts repeatedly mentioned that their wives helped sustain them in hiding by carrying food and supplies. As their name spread, they were blamed for nearly every major crime in the region. The classic magnet effect came into play, where the most notorious fugitives become the default suspects whether evidence exists or not. And the price on Wyatt's head reportedly climbed to $5,000 or $178,000 today. Now do take these reward amounts with a grain of salt, as I only found the amounts in a couple sources, and it is very common for these numbers to be exaggerated. By early 1895, Zip Wyatt's story began to take a noticeably darker shape as the pair were linked, sometimes with evidence, sometimes by rumor alone, to bigger crimes and even bigger outlaw networks. On the 20th of January 1895, in County D, modern-day Blaine County, Treasurer Fred Hoffman was killed, and Zip Wyatt quickly became a suspect. Reports claimed the gun used in the murder could be traced back to him, but when I looked closely at the case file, Alfred Son vs. Territory, Oklahoma, that was in the University of Tulsa's archive, the connection rested on remarkably thin ground. The only link to Wyatt appears to hinge on a single witness who mentioned the name Yeager, which led to the belief that Wyatt, known to use the alias Dick Yeager, was somehow involved. Around the same time, Wyatt and Ike Black were increasingly associated with the Doolin-Dalton gang, and were even rumored to have taken part in the Rock Island train robbery at Dover on the 3rd of April 1895. Some sources treat that connection as established fact, while others suggest it was little more than a rumor born of proximity and reputation. In Indian Territory and Oklahoma Territory, membership in a gang was rarely formal. It could mean riding on a single job, sharing hideouts, crossing paths with the same men, or simply being known in the same outlaw circles. In that environment, reputation often hardened faster than evidence, and once a man like Zip Wyatt was marked, almost any major crime could be laid at his feet. Then we have the single most puzzling document in Zip Wyatt's entire timeline. Deputy U.S. Marshal Chris Matson's return on a federal warrant, dated the 4th of April 1895. In that return, Matson states, quote, "Within named man has been pursued by myself and other deputies for several months. On the third last, he was reported near Enid, and I went there and took up his trail, but did not arrest him, as a party of farmers, who were also pursuing him, had already secured him before I could overtake him. As he is so badly wounded as to be considered incurable, and may die at any moment, I recommend that such testimony as may be established his identity be taken at once in the jail, where he is now confined. Enid. This that it may be positively known that he, who is wanted for many crimes, is no longer at large, and that if no other complaints are entered against him, he be held on this." On paper, that reads like the end of Zip Wyatt, captured and dying, but it collides head-on with the rest of the record, because in the months that follow, Wyatt and Black are still out robbing, fighting, and slipping by the law. That leaves only messy possibilities. Madsen was misinformed and the wounded prisoner wasn't Wyatt. Wyatt was briefly held and escaped again, or the farmers were friendlies who staged a capture and misled the deputies. Whatever the explanation, it's a perfect example of why outlaw history is so hard. You can have an official document that feels definitive, and yet the story keeps moving. By the 3rd of June 1895, the chase was openly turning into a small war. That day, an outlaw gang robbed a store and post office at Fairview, Oklahoma, taking valuables and 3 horses. A mixed force went after them almost immediately. Deputy U.S. Marshals Gus Hadwinger and J.K. Runnels, Woods County Sheriff Clay McGrath, and Deputy Marion Hildreth among them. The next day, on the 4th, lawmen hit the gang's Gypsum Hills hideout, a cave that served as a defensive nest. The fight was described as lasting the entire day. In the exchange, a horse was killed, and 2 women connected to the gang, Belle Black, the wife of Ike Black, and Jenny Freeman, who may have been romantically involved with Wyatt, were captured. Those women reportedly told authorities that both outlaws were wounded. Wyatt shot through the left arm and Black in the heel or foot. Even injured, the men slipped out on foot. In late July, the outlaws moved with the kind of nerve that makes legends. On July 25th, 2 riders believed to be Wyatt and Black approached a farm near Windview. They posed as lawmen, ate supper, and asked calm, almost polite questions about where to buy supplies. Then rode to Oxley and robbed the general store and post office for a small haul, roughly $35 in supplies. They were recognized during the robbery, and the next day posses were on their trail. Near the head of Salt Creek, about 6 miles northwest of Oxley, the outlaws were cornered in camp, and yet another gunfight broke out. One deputy was wounded in the left shoulder, but Wyatt and Black escaped yet again on foot. and this time, their luck had a new problem. Their horses were gone, meaning they were running in a country where mounted men had the advantage. Still, they kept moving. Late that evening, they came out of the hills about 5 miles west of Okeen, stole a horse and a cart from a farmer, slipping through picket lines that were supposed to box them in. One account adds a detail that just seems a little too perfect. Wyatt playing calm music with a harmonica, using it to make nervous guards think nothing was wrong while he drifted past. Whether that detail is literal or embellished, it captures the side of fugitive survival often not mentioned. Not just gunplay, but nerve, deception, and the ability to act normal in the middle of a manhunt. On the 28th and 29th of July, the chase compressed into repeated contact. A posse led by Robert Collison, the constable of Forest Township, trailed the fugitives into the canyons, and in another exchange of fire, a posse member named Frank Pope was shot in the right leg. A separate 9-man posse from the Lacey area tracked them again, and a running fight in the canyon reportedly lasted 25 minutes. One posse member, Jack Ward, later said that the outlaws were firing faster than the men surrounding them. Ward claimed he fired deliberately at Wyatt 3 times, felt sure he struck him in the breast, and saw him fall twice, yet the outlaws still broke through, captured 2 horses from the posse, and vanished. By the 31st of July, reports described the fugitives taking a zigzagging course along the North Canadian River, while multiple posses, sometimes exaggerated to 200 strong, tried to close in on them. By the beginning of August 1895, the long chase finally closed in. There were differing accounts of exactly what happened, but the results are the same. The first being that Wyatt and Black took shelter in a small shack roughly 4 miles east of present-day Canton, believing they had bought themselves at least one quiet night. Instead, a posse led by Marion Hildreth found them on the 1st of August. Accounts agree on the essential moment. When the outlaws emerged from the cabin, Black was shot in the head and killed almost instantly. Wyatt was also hit, struck in the chest, yet somehow managed to break contact and escape into the surrounding country. Another, more detailed version by Bob Bosbell from True West magazine places the encounter just north of Caneville. After eating supper, Black and Wyatt reportedly stepped outside arguing over a final chew of tobacco when Deputy Hildreth ordered them to throw up their hands. They did, but both hands held weapons. Hildreth fired first, killing Black outright. Wyatt returned fire at a furious pace, levering his Winchester as fast as he could work it, before being hit by a bullet that tore a deep furrow across his chest near the right breast. Dropping his rifle and then recovering it, Wyatt shouted back toward the posse, quote, "Marion Hildreth, you have killed the best man in Oklahoma," before sprinting into a cornfield under heavy fire. Despite being badly wounded, he vanished once again. Black's end was unceremonious. Deputy Sheriffs Marion Hildreth and J.W. Muir hauled his body to Alva in a horse-drawn wagon. On him were found only a photograph of his wife, Belle, $1.50 in silver, and copies of 2 ballads. Ike Black was buried in a pauper's grave at the Alva Municipal Cemetery, without ceremony, at county expense, a stark contrast to the fear his name had carried only days earlier. Wyatt, meanwhile, was running on borrowed time. After escaping the initial gunfight, he forced his way to the home of a young doctor named Eddington, about 2 miles away. The doctor reportedly told him bluntly that the wound was too severe for travel. Wyatt's reply was simply, quote, "I have to travel, fix me up." After receiving what treatment the doctor could give, Wyatt took the man's buckskin horse and rode east, only to abandon it after several miles when the pain became unbearable. Trackers later found the horse wandering back with saddle and bridle still attached. Unable to ride, Wyatt resorted to desperation. Near Homestead, he stopped a farmer with a span of mules and a lumber wagon and compelled him to carry him roughly 25 miles northeast. After crossing the Cimarron River, Wyatt encountered a 14-year-old boy driving a 1-horse cart. Terrified, the boy was forced to drive the wounded outlaw at speed for another 25 miles into southwestern Garfield County before being released. Wyatt continued on alone, bleeding, exhausted, and barely staying ahead of the closing net. On the afternoon of the 3rd of August, Wyatt was seen crossing the Rock Island Railroad tracks near Wakamis, about 5 miles south of Enid. Word reached Garfield County Sheriff L.Z. Thralls, who quickly formed another posse. Near Skeleton Creek Valley, roughly 14 miles east of the railroad, lawmen discovered an abandoned horse and cart, evidence that Wyatt was again on foot and dangerously close. That night, he appeared at the cabin of John Daly, demanding food and a horse. Daly later recalled the dried blood on Wyatt's shirt, his 3-week beard, and his hollow, desperate appearance. After being refused help, Wyatt moved on, stealing horses where he could, discarding them as they failed under his weight and wounds. By dawn on the 4th of August, the final pursuit was underway. A 40-man posse from the Anti-Horse Thief Association out of Sheridan joined forces with lawmen from Enid. Tracking Wyatt southeast toward Marshall and Logan County, they found his last horse grazing freely about 5 miles south of town. The tracks led into a cornfield on the farm of Alvin Ross. There, on a sandy mound where corn wouldn't grow, the chase ended. Accounts differ in detail but agree in result. Some describe Wyatt being unconscious from exhaustion, others say he attempted a fight one last time. When deputies moved into the cornfield and ordered him to surrender, Wyatt reached instinctively for his weapons, a Winchester and a Colt revolver. Deputies Ad Polk and Tom Smith fired almost simultaneously, striking him in the hip and abdomen. Even after falling, he reportedly tried to raise himself and fire again before being disarmed. After 125 days on the run and pursuit by posses numbering in the hundreds and sometimes exaggerated into the thousands, Zip Wyatt was finally captured, grievously wounded and barely alive. He was taken first to Hennessy, or to a small church in Sheridan, then taken to the Garfield County Jail, where surgeons believe he had a fair chance of surviving, though his condition was dangerous. Newspaper accounts described him as sullen and silent, uttering scarcely a word. Jurisdictions immediately began arguing over who had the right to try him and who would collect the reward, as doctors warned that the outlaw was likely dying. John Daly and the members of the Sheridan posse ultimately split the reward money. For the next several days, despite his condition, Wyatt became a grim attraction. Crowds came to see the man who had kept the territory in turmoil for months, and newspapers described the jail as being under heavy guard in case friends attempted a rescue. During this period, Wyatt appeared to enjoy the attention, boasting from his cell that he had killed as many as 11 men and escaped justice repeatedly. On the 7th of August, Wyatt's father, John T. Wyatt, arrived to see him and spoke to reporters. He insisted his son was only 24 or 25 years old, denied that he had participated in the Dover train robbery, and claimed he had never been a regular companion of either Bill Doolin or Bill Dalton. Meanwhile, Wyatt lingered in custody, kept alive by morphine as infection and blood loss reduced him to little more than a skeleton. One account notes that when deputies argued over custody while he lay half-conscious, Wyatt dryly suggested that if they would give him his six-shooter for 2 seconds, he would stop the argument. By early September, there was no longer any doubt. Asked by a doctor on what was believed to be his final day if he had anything to say or anyone he wished to see, Wyatt reportedly grinned and replied, quote, "Nobody to see, Doc, and nothing to say." He died shortly afterward, on the 7th of September, 1895. The following day, Wyatt's sister, Mrs. Prickett, appeared to claim his personal effects, but not his body, but the sheriff refused to release his possessions. On the 9th of September, Zip Wyatt was buried in a cheap pine coffin, without a marker, in a pauper's field south of Enid, with no funeral and no family present. Years later, when bodies from the old cemetery were relocated, Wyatt's grave was already lost, left behind beneath what is now a residential neighborhood. In the end, the outlaw who had survived gunfights, posses, and months on the run vanished almost completely, not in another escape, but in an unmarked grave, in a story remembered mostly through rumor, headlines, and the uneasy silence that followed. Before we end this, was Zip Wyatt really a part of the Doolin-Dalton gang? To answer in short, I have no idea. To give a full answer, sources were all over the place, with some saying there was no connection, some saying it was all just rumors, and others saying it was fact. As I stated earlier, Zip Wyatt may have been a part of the Dover robbery with the Doolin-Dalton gang, or they knew each other and used the same hideouts at various times, or they just saw each other's names in the paper. In terms of the law, Remember that arrest warrant for Zip Wyatt that was returned from Chris Mattson? The last sentence of that warrant reads, quote, Zip Wyatt was known as one of the most notorious outlaws in Oklahoma Territory and a member of the Doolin-Dalton gang. So clearly, the law believed he was, but I can't say without a shadow of a doubt whether he was or he wasn't. What do y'all think? I hope you all enjoyed this episode on Zip Wyatt. If you did, please give a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. And if you're listening on Spotify, please give a 5-star rating and hit that follow button. All of this really helps me grow and reach new listeners. I can't say it enough. Thank you for everyone's support. It's amazing watching this all grow, and all the interactions I've had recently have been amazing. Thank you. Join the membership family. For just $1, you'll get access to bonus content like the first stagecoach robbery in U.S. history, or James H. Levy, the forgotten gunfighter. Thank you to the membership family. Y'all are greatly appreciated. We will see y'all next time, and remember, when in doubt, shoot straight, shoot fast. God bless.